Hare Krishna. Welcome all the devotees for yet another session on devotee care organized by the GBC SPT Facebook page and the Devotee Care Committee. We are very honored to have a series of leaders from ISKCON over the last several months. We had His Holiness Jayapatak Swami Maharaj, His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, Radhanath Swami Maharaj, Niranjan Swami Maharaj, Devamrit Swami Maharaj, and we also had His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj, among other people, sharing on various perspectives on devotee care, including care for those in the renounced order, care for the preachers, care for leaders, etc., etc. One of the very important areas of care in today's context of ISKCON is care for Grihastha Ashram, those who are in the householder ashram. We have currently the majority of ISKCON devotees staying as householders, practicing Krishna consciousness in their own residences, following Srila Prabhupada's teachings, connected and serving in some local ISKCON temple. And in this context, what are some of the initiatives of care which can be integrated within the householder ashram, within the Grihastha Ashram? To answer these questions, we have a very wonderful team with us. They are known as the Grihastha Vision Team, led by Partha Prabhu and Uttama Dasi. We welcome both of them for this evening session on devotee care. Welcome, Prabhu and Uttama Devi Mataji. So I would like to begin by asking you, how did the Grihastha Vision Team actually start? What is the history to this?
About 17 years ago, the Canadian leaders decided to have an initiative to strengthen families in Canada. So they somehow rather coerced my husband and I to start something. And so we had this brainstorm that, the Catholic Church has been suggesting that everybody get premarital education before they can have a wedding in a Catholic church. And in that way, they brought people in to get a support system. So I said, in Canada, why don't we do that too? And Bhakti Mark Swami and Brhastashram said, yes, let's do it. So they put it on the books. So then everybody in Canada was supposed to get premarital education before they had a fire sacrifice in any one of our temples. So then we had to quickly go out and get some training. And that training was one of the best things that ever happened to our marriage. So, it's very conducive to supporting marriage. So after that, Praharna shared with Uttama Prabhu in the US what they were doing in Canada. And he said, oh, I know some people in the US who are working in the area of marriage and family. And so he put us all together, and that's how the Grihastha Vision Team started.
I'd also like to say that we're a part of a bigger team. We're actually just little puppets that the rest of our team members are they're actually working us. And Krishnadini and Tariq Prabhu's, Archana Siddhi and Karnamrita, Jagannath and Chintamani, and now Rajalila and Ekaviri, I'm sorry. They're all part of the Grihastha Vision Team, and we actually work together as a team to create our initiatives and support each other in our work. So there's a bigger team than the two of us for sure.
So if anyone wants to have more information about what you're doing, do you have a resource or website or any area where people can connect with and get more information and stuff like that?
Yes, we have a website, VaishnavaFamilyResources.org. We have a book called The Heart and Soul Connection, a devotional guide to marriage, service, and love. It's available in English, Portuguese, Russian, Italian, and hot off the press in China now, in Chinese. So that's available. And other resources we have are Our members can do online trainings, which we've been doing a lot of in the COVID era. And we also do in-person seminars and training sessions. So there's a large body of resources that we have available for Grihastha training.
Thank you so much for sharing this. You have worked a lot on creating this course. So could you tell us a brief history about how did you develop this material for this particular course? Was it, something which you planned, or, got it from some particular source, or you started actually giving these experiential learnings and then you kind of put all of that together? So what was the history, how you put it all together?
How the group started was we started looking at all the challenges faced within the Grihastha Ashram, and also started to consider what were the maybe inappropriate attitudes that might have caused some of those problems, maybe some of the negative paradigms that might have caused them, maybe some of the misunderstanding and misapplication of some of Srila Prabhupada's teachings that might have contributed to that. And the group actually brainstormed a huge list of, actually it was many lists on flip chart pages.
Of all the difficulties that had shown up in the Grihastha Ashram
Right.
over the years.
And they were put on flip chart papers and posted all over the walls. And then the group broke those challenges into categories and then began to look at what were the essential values from Srila Prabhupada's teachings that, if properly understood and applied, could rectify those problems or prevent them from happening in the first place. And from that point, we came up with 12 key principles and values, and they're on the screen now. And so all our materials are based upon promoting those healthy Krishna conscious values. And we understand in Srila Prabhupada's statement of purpose, his first item was to, through a systematic process of education, to correct the imbalance of values in society, to create peace and tranquility. So we see that through the culture of nurturing healthy values, problems can be rectified and managed.
So when we discovered our 12 principles, then we formulated it into a course incorporating how to apply those in Grihastha Ashram.
Right.
And we wrote our book based on that also.
Fantastic. Now, since you just showed these 12 principles, maybe you could just, take us through the flow of those 12, just very briefly, like just to give an idea about, what was the logic behind putting it all together. Let's have that on the screen again. And maybe you can just take us very, very briefly, just so that we get a bird's eye view of this.
So the first principle is quite obvious and pinnacle and foremost, which is alignment with Srila Prabhupada, because ultimately everything we do is based upon Srila Prabhupada's teachings. The second point was spiritual growth and progress. And we understand that the Grihastha situation is not just a material situation, but it's also an ashram. And an ashram is a place for spiritual culture. And that's a very important thing that we try to stress to Grihasthas, that they have to see that their household situation, their Grihastha ashram, it's a very important part of their spiritual life. It's not something different than their spiritual life. And if they can realize that, it helps them to take their marriage as a great responsibility to their spiritual life and to Srila Prabhupada's mission.
So the third one is to have spiritual equality while understanding material difference. One of the seminars that we do is navigating the male-female paradox, because sometimes in Grihastha life, it takes a while to get used to how you're different.
Yeah, and if couples can understand their differences and learn to honor them, that understanding can become a strength in the marriage. Whereas if you don't understand and honor the differences, it can become a wedge, which can and does destroy marriages. So that's a very important principle. The next principle was a positive and realistic vision. And culturally around the world, there's a very common paradigm and idea that there's some fairy tale marriage, that the princess is going to marry Prince Charming and they're going to live happily ever after. The reality is, marriage doesn't make you happy. Marriage makes you married. And once you are married, you can do the hard work of learning to live together peacefully and happily in Krishna consciousness. But there's some work involved, which comes through trying to apply the other principles, especially understanding the material difference in spiritual equality, spiritual growth and progress. So it's very important, we see, for couples to develop a realistic, healthy attitude towards marriage.
And marriage requires a great deal of mutual respect and appreciation, because as soon as we don't verbally appreciate or with our actions show respect and gratitude, then we become overfamiliar. And when overfamiliarity enters in, it's very easy to start to have a negative sentiment towards our partner. And then that can lead to, at its worst, contempt. And contempt is one of the biggest precursors of divorce. So we want to make sure that we ongoing show that appreciation, not take each other for granted.
In further answering the question of how we developed our materials, we do use some resources from modern psychology. And as Srila Prabhupada described, and it's described in the Bhagavatam, how all fields of science like psychology and chemistry, Prabhupada described it, they can be used in Krishna service, and they actually become Hari Kirtan. And sometimes as devotees, we are so close to Krishna, we don't realize it. Like right behind us, there's Radha and Krishna. So if we actually realize that, household life would be very peaceful. We would be treating each other very respectfully, kindly, compassionately. But sometimes there's a disconnect that behind closed doors, we forget that Krishna is in our life, and we maybe behave in ways that aren't so Vaishnava in the highest sense. So we find that using some tools from modern psychology can just help us to get that perspective that, yes, Krishna.
How to apply the Vaishnava principles in our lives.
That's a very important understanding, to use modern psychology as a tool to help us realize the practical application of Krishna consciousness. The sixth point is commitment and dedication. So again, as if we see our marriage as a service to Srila Prabhupada, as a service to Srila Prabhupada's mission, that's extremely important. And Prabhupada described how this commitment to the order of the spiritual master and his mission, that's the active principle of spiritual life. And so again, if we can see our marriage as a commitment, not just to each other, but also to each other, to Krishna, to Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya's mission, it's actually a great responsibility. And that sense of commitment, that can help us, I don't like to use the word endure, but it can help us cross through and navigate the inevitable challenges that come to all couples in marriage. So that commitment and dedication is extremely important in marriage.
So is open and honest communication. You know, we were touching on how we do have differences, not even just because we're male and female, just because we're different living entities. And in order to be able to live together harmoniously, we do have to have that open and honest communication. And sometimes that is a skill that needs to be developed. And without it, we see that a lot of problems arise in marriages, and they're not well dealt with because of not having the skill of being able to communicate well. So it's a huge skill that needs to be acquired when one enters the Grihastha Ashram for your partner and for your kids.
And as Vaishnavas, not just Grihasthas, but even all Vaishnavas, Brahmacharis, and other ashrams, we have Rupa Goswami's 6 loving principles, and there's 2 of them as Vaishnavas, and especially Grihasthas, we have mastered, which is accepting prasad and distributing prasad. And 2 that we're also pretty good at is sometimes we give gifts and sometimes we accept gifts. But there's 2 very important recommendations he gave for loving exchanges, which is to reveal one's mind in confidence and hear in confidence. And again, that's very crucial for Grihasthas in terms of understanding each other and navigating these kind of challenges. The next point was personal and social responsibility. And again, that's very essential, especially if we see our responsibility in relationship to the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We came across one letter once. I don't know what Srila Prabhupada had seen at the time or was experiencing, but he said in the letter, we need many examples of sane Grihasthas in the Krishna consciousness movement. So actually all of us are setting examples for others. Even we may not realize it, but the world is actually watching all of us. We're influencing people in ways that we don't realize. So if we can realize we have a great responsibility to Srila Prabhupada to have healthy marriages, and there's no such thing as a perfect marriage. That's an illusion also. But there's couples who strive to have balanced, stable, peaceful, happy relationships. And that sets a great example to other society. So realizing that responsibility, that actually can connect us to Lord Chaitanya and his mission and his mercy to actually help us to have healthy marriages.
So we also have the principle of economic development and prosperity. And we understand that the Grihastha Ashram is very much a contributor to society in that they support most of the activities of our Krishna conscious movement. And, excuse me, we also need to focus on children's welfare. How our children are brought up is going to determine how society unfolds. And we see that many of the problems in modern society stem from the fact that children haven't had good upbringings. So we see that it's really, really essential to focus on our children's welfare.
And the next point was family love and affection. So affection is very important. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada described affection as being a symptom of life. He didn't just say it was something important, but rather he said it was a symptom. And so I currently have a heart beating in my chest, and if you feel my hand, there'll be a pulse there. And that pulse is a symptom that I'm alive. And if you felt my wrist and there was no pulse, you would know that I've had expired. So in a very similar way in marriages, if couples do not create this mood of mutual service and loving affection with each other, that symptom of life in the marriage can gradually drive up. And we see around the world, and sadly also within our society, many places there's a very high level of divorce. And a big reason for this is that that symptom of life within a marriage, affection, becomes dried up, and couples feel no connection and they divorce. So that's a very important principle to cultivate and nurture within marriage is this family love and affection.
Go ahead.
So, the next point was regulated, balanced, and exemplary lifestyle. And for Grihasthas, that's a great, great challenge, how to balance all their responsibilities, family responsibilities, sadhana responsibilities, seva responsibilities,
your health,
your work responsibilities. So Grihasthas have many, many things to juggle in their life, and that's a great challenge. But it's a challenge you have to face and not become overwhelmed by, but rather learn how to manage that within your life so that you can become exemplary. So all these principles taken together, our experience from our own lives and seeing it being applied in the lives of others are very much conducive to having stable relationships in the Krishna consciousness movement and happy relationships.
Thank you so much for sharing, all these details. It's organized so beautifully, and it reflects the several years of experience which has gone into, putting all of this together, and also including your experiences with this. So, in your experience during your actual sessions all over the world, can you tell us some of the countries you have visited and groups where you have conducted in ISKCON temples, some of these sessions so far, just to give everybody an idea about the length and the breadth of your experience in conducting these seminars?
Obviously, Canada, US, Trinidad, Guyana, across South America, Chile.
Many countries in Europe, India,
Russia. I think we've been
South America,
23 different countries. It's very interesting. Everywhere we go, despite
the problems are the same.
Despite the cultural differences, the problems Grihasthas face are exactly the same. Everyone's facing exactly the same. And our experience also in working with groups, it's actually, they find it a great relief to realize we're all in the same boat.
And we're normal.
And we're normal, and we have the same problems. It's like a great relief for Grihasthas to realize that we're normal. It's normal to have problems and challenges.
It doesn't mean you have to give it up and get divorced. There's ways to work through them.
Right. So, I mean, one of the greatest challenges couples are facing nowadays, families are facing across the world, especially in these times, is dealing with negativity.
Yes.
Especially now during the pandemic, things have really turned to the negative, and some of that negativity, either in the corporate world or in the social life, is then affecting also the families. So in your experience across the world, what have been some of the top few negativities which families have to deal with?
Well, one of the first is actually being labeled by psychiatrists as negative sentiment override. So it comes into relationships when we stop giving each other the benefit of the doubt. And that negativity can magnify our partner's faults, and whether they're real or imagined. And, that starts with that ingratitude. That's why we have to cultivate the mutual respect and appreciation. Because when we get that negative sentiment override, it starts to erode trust in relationships. And trust is a huge part of marriage. Like, it's more important than love. Are you going to love somebody you don't trust? No. So we have to keep up that sense of trust. And ways to combat that negative sentiment override are to learn good skills of problem solving, to spend quality time together, to have those stress-reducing conversations so you don't feel, let that negativity overcome your relationship. And to consciously notice when your partner's trying to fix the connection and to respond, not to just ignore them. So it's something that is an ongoing battle, and we need to work at it.
And especially during the COVID era, actually around the world, applications for divorce have skyrocketed because couples are packed up together and the tensions increase. And so, as you say, there's a lot of negativity. And I was just recalling Prabhupada, he said once that Krishna can make the possible impossible and the impossible possible. So Krishna can actually make the negative turn into a positive. And I remember Radhanath Maharaj, I did a wedding once in New York, and he gave a nice talk, and he said, Grihastha Ashram, he said, it's the best ashram for making spiritual advancement. Because to be successful in the Grihastha Ashram, you have to be humble and patient and tolerant and compassionate. He said, those are the qualities you need for pure devotional service. So what better, what better fertile ground? So especially during COVID era, we have a great opportunity to practice that patience. And I was actually reflecting upon that, because sometimes in those situations, we're trying to become patient, and, you know, we feel those frustrations and irritations. Those frustrations and irritations, that's actually a fire that's burning our false ego away. So we can actually turn this into something positive to help us spiritually progress.
Thank you. Now, in an extremely fast-changing society where people's careers, jobs, and society in general is changing so fast, one of the greatest challenges people face is dealing with transitions. So, you know, how would you deal with families to cope better with transitions? And with some of your examples and, you know, something you would like to share.
Well, one of the biggest transitions is transitioning from Brahmacharya ashram into Grihastha ashram. And we see that that's really a valuable time to gain skills, to educate yourself on what kind of skills will I need to enter the Grihastha ashram, to learn what type of partner is a good partner, and what do I need to be a good partner, and how to make good choices. So transitions come very often in our life. Sometimes we transition from not having children to parenthood. Also a great time to learn skills. In fact, I believe that social scientists have found that that's the best time to catch people. They're the most open to learning when they first transition. Just like we see that new devotees, they're so eager to learn the philosophy. It's a transition. So it's a great time to catch people because they're so receptive.
And also in those times of life when there's a transition, like I say, maybe career change or economic change, health challenges, there's many different kinds of transitions that happen in life. And I think Prabhupada was so brilliant in stressing the importance of values, because if you have values as your focus in your life, that's like your map. When you're in the ocean, you have a map, you have a compass, and you navigate the storms using your map. The map gives you your focus on how you're going to navigate through that storm and get to your destination. And so in a very similar way in our life, we face different obstacles and challenges and transitions, but always having that reference point, that beacon on the horizon of these principles and values, that can give us the direction and strength to navigate through those challenges.
Like one of the
Thank
challenges
you so
we're
much.
having right now is the sun is rising. It's coming in the window at a different angle. So we always have to adjust where to sit.
So on that note, what about developing relationship skills? Some people feel that they are born with a certain set of skills, and that's their karma, and that's what they can do.
I
And
am
so,
what I am, and that's all that I am, and this is all you're going to get.
yeah, if you don't agree or if you can't get along with my skill sets, then that's it. I can't do anything about it. So how do you address that?
First of all, marry someone with a growth mindset that they want to keep growing and improving. That's one of the most important things to look for in a partner.
Yes. And in life also, we do have our own mindsets. There's an interesting prayer. There's many addiction treatment programs, and they're based upon
12 steps.
12 steps. But they have an interesting prayer most of these groups use, and it's, God, grant me the serenity to understand the things I can change, understand the things I cannot change, and please bless me with the wisdom to know the difference between the two. So within ourselves also, we all have some things we can change and we can't change. And those things that we can change, they're actually for our betterment, and it's very important that we learn those. And in close relationships also, whether it's family or society, community, we need to understand that kind of who we are as individuals, what's unique and very integral to who we are that can't change in terms of our values, and things that we can change in ourselves, and to understand that in others also, and to learn to respect those differences. And that's a very important aspect of Srila Rupa Goswami's recommendation of this loving exchange, because you and I might have some difference of opinion, and according to Rupa Goswami, I might have like a heated difference of opinion with you. So I have my frame of thought, you have your frame of thought. So according to Rupa Goswami, I can take my frame of thought, I can put it down on the table, and I can hear you and I can understand you. And I can let you know that I understand why you think the way you do, why you feel the way you do about that, and why it's so important to you, even though I don't agree. I can understand that, and I can let you know I understand and make you feel understood. And similarly, you can take your point of view down, put it on the table, and similarly understand my point of view. So we can understand each other's point of view, and maybe we find some workable solution, or maybe we just agree to disagree, but because we understand each other, we still love each other as friends. Whereas sometimes in conversations and trying to understand other people and views, I'm listening to you, but I'm just thinking how I'm going to defeat your point of view. So that's not really communication. So a very important part in navigating those kind of challenges in terms of differences, it's this mutual understanding and this respect.
When we understand someone, we're more likely to be able to reach out and do what they need. And also when we are understood, we feel more connected and appreciated. So it works both ways.
Thank you so much. Would you like to share some of your experiences or case studies where, without, of course, getting into personal details, but how by attending your seminar or by sharing some of your information, you actually saw very positive and powerful turnaround and impact? Because nothing really touches people's hearts than hearing some real studies, just an example of how things can work if the proper principles are applied.
I remember finishing one seminar, and the Mataji came to
myself,
her, and said how her husband, he he was treating her so much more nicely, so much more respectfully. And he actually came to me later and he said, you know, he said, I think my head had been on backwards. And he said, you actually flipped it around and put it on properly. He said, because I used to think my wife was just my servant. And literally he was treating his wife like a domestic servant. And they just had this complete paradigm shift that they're both servants of Krishna. And actually, Srila Prabhupada, he said that if the husband thinks the wife is his servant, he said, that's not very good. And if the wife does not serve the husband, Prabhupada said, that is also not very good. And he said, if the husband makes the wife feel loved and protected, automatically she's going to want to serve him. And so there's a proper Vaishnava understanding. Sometimes devotees get that realization, well, we're both servants of Krishna and we're meant to serve Krishna together and please the deity together. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he said a similar thing, that how, just very briefly, he said both husband and wife should only accept someone as a spouse who they see as a better servant of the Lord than themselves. So, which means this mutual respect and humility. So we experience sometimes couples have this breakdown. They realize that they need to serve each other. And we also, one couple I remember telling us that every single morning when the husband went to work, he had to walk down this hallway to go out the door to get in the car. And he said every single morning practically there'd be a fight in the hallway. And actually one devotee told me that his first memory of meeting that couple was coming to the door, and the husband was just walking out the door and she was throwing a shoe at him as he went out the door. and they said after that, they just realized, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to stop that fighting. And they just had this realization that, why are we doing this? We just have to work this out. And so a lot of couples, once they realize you have a decision, you have the power within you to how you're going to react to different situations and different stimuluses that come in your relationship. And you can respond to them in the modes of goodness or in passion and ignorance, and there's going to be very different results. And so we have that ability to decide, okay, here's a situation. Let's try to deal with this in a situation that's more in the mode of goodness. Let's move it towards Shuddha Sattva and Krishna consciousness. And sometimes couples, when they just realize that, well, there's some skills we can use, it can dramatically change the relationships.
I remember one seminar we were giving, the husband wasn't very interested. He was kind of working outside the temple. And every once in a while, he'd kind of come to the door and listen in. And his wife was like very, very eager for the seminar. And sometimes he would be at the door and he would start to go, and then it would seem like something would like kind of pull him back, and he'd listen a little bit longer. So time went on, and I had no idea whatever happened with that couple. And then last time we were at the ILS in Mayapur, I ran into this lady and she says, you can't believe the change in my husband. Since just hearing a few words and me learning how to listen better and understand him, it's completely changed him. And he's so happy now. So, you know, we've had a few success stories.
And one of the results we've seen, as we said, our book is also published in Russian, Portuguese, Italian, Chinese, one other language.
Russian.
And Russian.
Yeah.
And that all came because someone read the book and they got so inspired. It helped them so much. They thought, okay, why I have to translate this into my language. And
we didn't ask them.
It didn't cost us anything to publish these books in other languages. People just got inspired by the change it made in their lives, and they wanted to share that with others in their own language, so they published it. So we see there's an effect going on. Oh, we can't hear you, Garanga.
Garanga Prabhu, we cannot hear you.
So I was just sharing that, you know, these stories and real life experiences are very heart touching, and it goes to show that any kind of intervention, training, cultivation really makes a great difference in devotees' life. And if people get an opportunity, they should always avail of this. I mean, that's the take-home message which I can get from this. So coming back to, a very important key element in any relationship, which is that of communication. So within the paradigm of your seminars and courses which you conduct, what are some of the specific skills which you impart, or some kind of actual material you have with respect to improving communication?
One of the tips that I love to share with ladies, because we're really good at it, it's complaining. So we try to teach couples how to turn their complaints into requests. And we can find that very often when we specifically state what we need, our husbands are very willing to help us. But most of the time they have no idea what we need, even though we think they should, because they love us. They should automatically know what we need. That's one of those fairy tales that we can thank Mr. Disney for. So a big skill is to request things, change it to a more positive tone of voice.
And we also teach a skill. It's also taught quite widely as something called nonviolent communication, that if you see someone is disturbed, they might be a little angry about something, a little frustrated, and most generally that's because they have some unmet need. And if you can identify the need of that person, their frustration or anger becomes greatly soothed, and you are put in a very favorable situation to negotiate that. And it's actually quite a simple technique, but it's again, all these things are actually Vaishnav behavior. Like we understand in the spiritual world, all talking is singing. I don't think in the spiritual world all talking is complaining. But it's even if there are complaints, it's like singing, like Radharani is complaining to Krishna. It's a completely different platform. It's on the platform of love. So if we can have this constant meditation that we need to elevate our consciousness to the mode of goodness.
And be compassionate.
And be compassionate in how we say things, how we interact. And we always have that choice and decision. If you can stop yourself at any moment and just question, okay, what mode of material nature am I in at this precise moment? Goodness, passion, or ignorance? I'm communicating with someone. Is this goodness, passion, or ignorance? And what's going to be the result of the three modes in my communication at that specific moment? So developing these healthy communication skills can help to elevate our consciousness more to the mode of goodness, to a situation that's more pleasing to Krishna, more pleasing to Prabhupada, and help us have very healthy, productive, loving communication.
So being conscious that we do need to be compassionate in our dealings can really change the mood in a house and between the couple. For example, if my husband comes home late from work and I just lash out at him, "You never come home on time." Great.
Hard to respond to.
Wait, welcome. Most likely that's going to trigger a defensive response.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
don't you appreciate it? I'm working so hard. I'm working overtime trying to pay for the bills. And then it would just be all this mudslinging back and forth, and the whole evening would be ruined.
But if he can reach out and see that I must have some need, that's why I'm upset, not just respond to my tone or how I'm upset, but to actually see what is it that she needs at this time.
So I could say something like, I see you're very frustrated. I'm guessing maybe that you had some plans for the evening and you're disappointed I didn't phone. Or so just I offered some empathy. Instead of reacting with anger, I offered some empathy.
And you don't know how that builds trust in relationships, that person's going to be there for me and help me through my difficult times. Huge skill to learn.
And the sad part is especially for grihasthas, is sometimes they become locked in these patterns of negative communication. It becomes very ingrained in the relationship, and it's not healthy for relationships and not healthy for your Krishna consciousness. But those negative patterns of interaction, they can be unlearned. Our god sister, Archana Siddhi, she does this nice program for developing compassion in communication. And she describes that we are all in this material world, we're born with some malware. We have this anti-humility software programmed in our brains. So we have to get in there and reprogram the circuits to respond with compassion and love and affection rather than reactive and false ego. And it's something we can reprogram. And that's the process of Krishna consciousness, to program our consciousness to always think of Krishna and to always behave in a way that's going to be pleasing to Krishna.
Even in marriage.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing some of your experiences. One other related question I had was, you began sharing these seminars with devotees in ISKCON around 15 to 17 years ago. And in this period, you have seen the world change, social media and so many other gadgets manifesting. So over the last 17 to 20 years, as you have been sharing these seminars all over the world, what have been some of the changing patterns with respect to the most prominent problems which families are facing? Has there been, some major shifts you have seen because of how the world has changed because of, technology and social media and stuff like that?
I think one very big problem, we don't have one here, I can use this. One very big problem in relationships and in families is these things, the devices, tablets, phones. Psychologists today are extremely worried about young children, infants who are growing up, and the mother's nursing the child and the mother's holding a phone. And so this child is growing up, and the child is always seeing this device in their parent's life. And the child grows a little older, and the mother's always saying the child wants something, and the mother says, just a minute, I have to finish this text or whatever. And so the child is growing up thinking that
the device is more important than me.
So what's happening there is very little frightening for psychologists to see that happening. And also, we attended an interesting seminar once in Orlando, Florida, and one researcher was talking about healthy development of youth. And she was saying it's very concerning that children are spending so much time on devices. And when they spend inordinate amount of times on devices, on their computers, they actually did studies with MRI brain scans, and they actually find that kids from the age of 14 to early 20s, there's neurological pathways that are
not being developed.
Yeah, and those pathways that are not developing in kids who are on these devices, excessive amounts, are the pathways that are related to creative and critical thinking.
And relationship skills.
So she said, we have no idea what this next generation is going to turn out like. She said, it's actually very frightening. And so that's something that's very important for all Vaishnavas to realize, especially for Grihasthas, is that, we utilize these devices in Krishna service, but we have to be very careful that we don't become addicted to them, and that our children, their time on those things needs to be regulated in a very constructive way. That's something that's a big concern.
I've also noticed that more and more people are happy to be single because they think, everything, I can get all my relationships here, or perhaps they don't realize what they're missing. I also see a lot more couples not wanting to have children. Not sure exactly why, but that's some things that I've noticed over the last few years.
There's one very negative result of that technology, and it's the proliferation of pornography, because it's so easily available. Anyone can go in a corner somewheres and view all kinds of very illicit images. And also the significant body of research that actually shows that individuals who become addicted to this type of material, they also have very difficult times in relationships, because they're even finding that men become so jaded by pornography that they always need something
more and more,
because there's no relationship in some image on a screen. So they need something more graphic and unfortunately more violent. And there's men who begin to think that there has to be violence involved in affection. And it's very problematic. And even in the Vaishnav world, it's a problem, kind of a hidden problem. I noticed on our website, I started monitoring the traffic to different articles, and we have a few articles on pornography. And we get probably 30 to 40,000 views a year on our website. And I was noticing that every single day, the pornography articles are getting viewed at least 4 to 6 times. And so that's may seem a small number, but in the bigger picture, it's definitely an issue that's there in the world. And that's something that's very problematic, and something we need to address as a society to support that. Actually, there is some devotees in Russia developing some program for that. And also there's some programs being developed by devotees in the US to help devotees who develop that kind of addiction.
We do have a good resource on our website also for an online non-devotee source, but the addiction's the addiction.
And again, the negative can become positive with technology. Last 16 years, we were traveling all over the world, and that got completely shut down by COVID. And so we just started doing programs online. And actually, since the COVID started, we've done programs in, I think, 11 different countries, 6-7 days a week, something's going on. So
it's got its benefits.
It's got advantages, but you also have to be aware of the pitfalls of technology also.
Thank you so much. Now, if I have to ask you that if there is something which ISKCON as an organization and the leadership of ISKCON across the world must do to strengthen the overall quality of the Grihastha Ashram, because practically most families are connected to an ISKCON temple or a community where they have active service happening. So what would be 2-3 things you would recommend to the ISKCON leadership or ISKCON organization as support to strengthen long-term sustainable quality of the Grihastha Ashram?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say to earmark those couples in your community which others are naturally going to for guidance, and maybe request them to reach out and do something a little systematic. That's a good way to start. That's how we started. And to encourage all of your new couples to make sure that they get premarital education. We find now that a lot of the spiritual masters are instructing their disciples to do that. And we've seen a lot of headway, more and more couples taking premarital education now. So that's really, really good. And I would also really like to see those devotees that work in mental health fields to specialize in marriage counseling, because it is a specialized field. So encourage those devotees who are already headed towards those vocations to, see how important their skills will be in the association, in ISKCON and association of devotees.
I think that's very important, to create that culture of supporting marriage in society. In the past, and some places still, it's somewhat the situation that if a couple gets married, everyone's congratulations, good luck, goodbye, you're on your own. But in Canada, we try to create this culture that we don't just perform marriages, but we also want to support and nurture marriages. So I think that's something that can be very helpful, that if as a society we try and
change the culture
to support marriages. And especially we're talking about devotee care, and Gauranga Prabhu, you were mentioning how you have sannyas care and leadership care, and the base of all that care is actually the Grihastha Ashram, because they have to provide the resources to care for the sannyasis and support the leaders. And so we really do need to have that healthy, firm foundation of the Grihastha Ashram. And I think that's a very important part, a very foundational part of the structure of our society, which Srila Prabhupada wanted to build. And you see a building, if it has a weak foundation, it is not going to stand. And similarly, our society, it's built upon the foundation of the Grihastha Ashrams. Every individual Grihastha Ashram is a very important foundational block in that ashram. So it's incumbent upon every individual block to be as strong as they can. And it's incumbent upon us as a society to encourage and nurture within those individual Grihastha Ashrams that they all are getting facility and education and encouragement to become as strong as they can in that ashram. And I think that's a very important culture we need for the success of Srila Prabhupada's mission.
Because in the early years when we joined, marriage was a fall down. And it's kind of interesting because recently, quite a few couples that we've been doing premarital education with, they go, I don't know how devotees navigate through Anarta Nivritti without taking up Grihastha Ashram. They said, I've learned so much about myself and how to progress and grow. So we see that it's a gradual growth, and it's not a fall down. You can actually progress very nicely with support in the Grihastha Ashram. One
devotee told us many, many, many years ago, he got married, and one of his brahmachari friends gave him a wedding present. And the present was a bucket, a flashlight, and a rope for the deep, dark well. So
not too encouraging.
That's not very encouraging. So
devotee care needs to be able to encourage devotees along their path.
Thank you so much for sharing these wonderful realizations. And I think one of the most attractive features in what you have created is this course is very systematic, very well organized, and you also have a broad-based team which you have whom you have trained in different parts of the world. And if devotees from across the world want to reach out and connect with you, then do you also conduct online seminars for communities where you could take sessions online on Zoom or stuff like that, and devotees directly reach out? And
we're doing some right now with China, so we do that. We also do train happily married couples that have been married for at least 7 or 8 years, how to administer premarital education. And then once they get good at premarital education, they can probably also apply that work to helping devotees that are already married. So we do have that training for individual couples to learn how to help other couples also, along with doing trainings online to communities in general.
Right. So
we're more than happy to do that. Srila Prabhupada, he's given us so many invaluable gems of Krishna consciousness, and it's actually our duty to repay that debt to Srila Prabhupada by helping others to realize those gems of realizations of Krishna consciousness and how that can be practically applied in life.
Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time and sharing your several years of experience in caring for Grihastha couples across the world. We hope and pray that, once the lockdown ends over the next few months, many countries across the world would have opportunity to host your sessions, and you will be able to actually train many leaders across the world of ISKCON in this. And this is the website where you could connect with, and any of those who are viewing this now or later, if they want to contact both Prabhu and Mataji, can connect with this website, and the contact details are there. And they'll be happy to connect with you and take the conversation forward. Thank you so very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.